This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, with a beautiful downtown Toronto background behind me because I love Toronto and I'll be there next month for Frightmare in the Falls. But here we are on September the 18th, 2024, and I have a return guest, somebody that worked a job in a movie, a character that he played in a movie, a job that I work at. You see, I work as a cleaner, anybody that knows me. And of course, this guy is pretty famous in some John Hughes movies, but so many people love The Breakfast Club, which I'm wearing on my shirt here, if I can get to show up. There we go. There we go. Got all the usual suspects on that shirt. And folks, I had him on here in 2017. He was a great interview guest, and I'm honored to have him on here, especially after meeting him at Chiller in April on my first trip to the US. I was there assisting Lisa Langlois at that event. Folks, I give you the awesome John Kapelos. How do you do, John?
I'm great. How are you, Greg?
I'm doing great. I know we're talking beforehand, and I gotta say, small world. How cool was it that I was listening to Vashi before we come on here? I had no idea. That just blows my mind, you
We're
know.
everywhere. We're everywhere.
Wow. I have great admiration for her as an interviewer. I gotta say, she does not let the guilty off the hook. And when I say guilty, I'm talking about the people that's been screwing this country up.
She's doing her job and she's impartial. She takes no prisoners and she goes for it. And she's smart and well informed. I mean, that's what you need and that's what you want.
Can you imagine if she walked into that detention room on that Saturday morning and dealt with those five?
Well, it would have been a different movie, that's for sure.
Forget about the principal. You have to worry about her.
Knowing her father and her late mother, I mean, she had quite the parents, so she would have been a heck of a principal there. She would have replaced Paul Gleason pretty well, I would
Oh
imagine.
yeah. Yeah. I listen to my earphones when I'm working overnights as a cleaner, and anytime she's got something up or online, I always give it a listen because I
One of her
just
updates, huh? She
yeah.
also has, I think she also has she has a show on iHeartRadio, I think too.
I heart radio, absolutely, absolutely. You
Understand.
know,
So, but you look good in front of Toronto there. I mean, I'm surprised you're kind of in the middle of the street. It looks like behind you. It's good the thing that the traffic is stopped for you.
there you go. Oh man, I always appreciate Lisa Langlois for invited me to Toronto in 2017 because it opened like that convention that we met at and Chiller.
Mhm.
That wouldn't have happened had Lisa not taken a chance to have me come to Toronto
That's a very
and
generous and kind
sh
act on her part. So,
I absolutely love Lisa Langlois. And when I was in Toronto, uh, I don't know whether it was 2019 or what it was, but she was talking about doing conventions in the States, and she said, "Greg, you should get a passport." And I got a passport right when I was in Toronto. So
I
yeah,
mean, you got it that quickly. Would you buy it on the street or something, Greg? I mean,
no, we went to the post office, got the picture taken and all that stuff. But Lisa's done a lot to help me improve my brand. Like I got business cards and stuff like that, and she's been very great that way. And so I have a
and
lot of love for Lisa.
somebody puts on the beard every morning and they apply it. Really,
Well, I'll be
that's
getting that all shave here soon, getting that all.
that's a real beard. I mean, you don't put it on with the spirit gum as we do in the movies.
Well, you know what? Sometimes I just rub my cat across my face. I don't know where he is. I know one thing, he's not cleaning my apartment, that's for sure.
Well, I'm telling you something. My dog will leave enough hair that I can have a beard in 20 minutes. So
There you go. And I got this with me too. This is my favorite
beautiful.
John Hughes movie. This
Very
is
good.
my
Is it your favorite
this is my favorite John Hughes movie is 16
of all
Candles.
his movies, huh?
I love 16
What are
Candles.
your other, can I ask you what your other ones are?
For John Hughes?
After that, after Breakfast Club, with
Oh my.
'cause I have a few of my favorites, and I'm not in any of my favorite John Hughes movies, but I really
Oh, really?
love Uncle Buck. I love Uncle Buck
Oh, Uncle Buck is great.
because I love John Candy, and John Candy was a big person in my early career and was a kind, loving guy. I really love John. So every time I see him on the screen, it's a weird feeling. I mean, not like it's like I'm seeing my father, but I have the same sort of feeling when I see a family member, you know? It's like, oh, that's nice to see him. And he's got such a beautiful daughter, Jennifer, and a son. You know, they really, really wonderful family, and his wife, Rose. So, I mean, he lives on in his family. It's just,
Well,
anyway,
a lot of times when people passed away, I do tribute interviews. Like I've had Alfred Hitchcock's granddaughter on here. I've had Audrey
really,
Hepburn's eldest son on here. Um, you know, I'm still in touch with Rowdy Roddy Piper's daughter, who comes on here every year. Um, I
neat.
do that when people passed away, and I would love to get somebody from John Candy's family on here because I saw his last movie, Wagons East, in the theaters, you know. But when I remember when he passed away, that was 1994. And so I would have been 22. But
I remember it vividly myself because it was March the 5th.
I think
And
so, yeah.
was my mother had just had a serious operation, and I was coming out of the hospital. I was in London, Ontario. It was a very cold March winter day. I got in the car and I turned on the car and I go, "He'll best be remembered for movies like Splash." And then they started listening to the movie. And I go, "What do you mean he'll best be remembered?" And they were in mid sentence in his mid obituary. And I have to say, I mean, I just broke into tears and started hitting the steering wheel, going, "No, no, no." It was such a bummer. And, you were in Canada. It was like a death in Canada. It was like a death in the family. I mean, Canadians were bummed. I mean,
You
it's
want me
horrible.
to tell you something I've always heard about him from other, I've interviewed
I can tell you a
various
few
people,
other things too.
yeah, various people that's worked with him, including people in the Blues Brothers. Here's one thing I always heard about him. I've heard this from at least two guests. When he met you on set, he always asked you about what your trailer was like. And then he made sure you had the best trailer, most comfortable space to live in while you're uh, shooting. I've heard that from at least two people.
Well, you know what they called him, right? His nickname was Johnny Toronto. And he was, when his character on Saturday on SCTV, Second City Television, was Johnny LaRue, this sort of bigger than life guy. And he was the life of the party sort of thing. Um, John had a remarkably generous spirit. When he died, I was told, because I was in London with my mother. But I was told by my dear friend Mike Haggerty, who has since passed away as well, and Joyce Sloan, my producer from Second City. I don't mean this to sound like a funeral fest, but they told me that and I don't know whether you know Los Angeles at all, but it's a big city, bigger than Toronto in landmass, land-wise. And the 405 is the ribbon of a freeway that goes down the west side of the city. And it's a big, at times, 6 to 8 lane freeway, 4 lanes on either side. And John Candy's funeral cortege with went to the Catholic cemetery down by uh, off of Sepulveda near Culver City. Anyway, and as it wended its way down the freeway, the traffic stopped. on the 405 in both sides. Now, you have to understand that's like planes stopping in midair. I mean, nothing that never effing happens. Never effing happens. In a city now, the second largest city in the United States, Los Angeles, and it's a big city. It's a metropolis. Like for that to happen, and whether it hit the radio or whatever happened, KNX, the news radio, the traffic radio, or so and so is going down. And my friend Mike Haggerty said to me, it was a chilling, memorable moment. So anyway, there you have it.
Yeah.
And just on an upside, John was really, really funny. And when I started at Second City, he was very generous and did some workshops with a bunch of us actors. And man, oh man, he opened doors. It was like, being in an empty hallway at night, you're like this, and you're cleaning all these rooms, and you just boom, 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 open all these doors, and you go, wow, look at the possibilities I can have as an actor, as a funny guy. And he was exhilarating. And he also provided a major introduction for me to people of Second City, Chicago. So that's how I basically got into Second City in Chicago. Not because of John Candy, but because of his introduction, I got an audition. So that was really, really big time for me.
Yeah. Well, you had asked me about John Hughes outside 16 Candles. Wow. I really like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Planes, Trains, Automobiles is fantastic. Yeah. That was a great performance out of
Well, I was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I shot about
yeah, and your scenes got cut. I think I remember you mentioned that.
4 days. Yeah, and the whole sequence got cut out.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But it's the way John made movies. It's the way movies are made. I mean, you win a few, you lose a lot. You shoot stuff, it makes it in, it makes it out. I mean, Breakfast Club, we shot a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff is available online where I tell the kids where they're all going to be today, 35, 40 years in the future. And John had that on VHS, and then one of the extra DVD packages came out 10, 12 years ago and included it, and now it's online. So anybody who's listening or watching this can go on YouTube and find it. But Greg, what makes it in the movie? What makes it in the movie?
Hmm.
It's like anything you do in life. You start a project and you go, well, I'd like to do this and this and this, and you go, well, I ended up doing this and this, but I didn't do the third thing, right? Or the third thing didn't end up being involved in the mix because it's not organic. And in terms of storytelling, um, the way John made The Breakfast Club was very how do you say, there was an instinctive, organic way he made it. I mean, he didn't, there are lots of books these days, and there were books then too, but that tell you how to make films, how to do stuff. On the 33rd page, you have to have this happen. And John made his movies according to his own gut. He wrote a song the way the Rolling Stones or the Beatles would write a song. He didn't do it according to an external form. The way anybody who's good at something. I mean, I'm sort of wandering around here, but he didn't. He wasn't a cookie cutter, right? Didn't do it by cookie cutter approach. And I think that's why you, me, people like it still to this day because, um, you know, it's unique. Period. And like all great pieces of stuff that we love, art, music, literature, what we like about them is, and this might sound a bit cliched or weird, is the jagged edges, the pieces that stick out to you. Go, oh, you know, that's not pretty, but my man, oh man, it makes me think. When I
Yep.
worked at Second City,
Hmm.
um, the best sort of scene that we do a scene. I'd do a scene with a man or a woman or a couple guys or whatever, and there'd be this moment in the scene where sometimes the audience would go ha, 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 at a laugh that you had no idea what they're laughing at, and you're doing comedy, right? But it's usually, my dog is agreeing. It's usually really, Jim's in trouble. Okay, tell him to take his medication. Anyway, what happens is that we called it the laugh of recognition, where basically somebody realizes a little piece of behavior that happens, and it could be any small little thing that's not a major thing, but people go, "Oh shit, that's me." I do that.
Yeah.
And that's what you beg for in any scenario, right? So when you see Breakfast Club and you see Brian cringing at the thought of failure, and that he actually thought of committing suicide because of his need for perfection, somebody's going to go, "That's me."
Yep.
Right? That's me. And John wasn't afraid to show the jagged edge there, right? He wasn't afraid to he wasn't sugarcoating it. "Oh, Brian's a good kid. He'd never do that." It's like, well, wait a minute. He thought about killing himself for a moment. Why? Doesn't matter. The reason might seem stupid to other people, but to him, it was because that's the sort of pressure he places on himself. And you look at everybody's problem, Bender, and you look at Molly's problems and Allie's problems, and you realize that people's problems are so unique to themselves, and they're not funny to them. They're important to them. And, we all, I think the commonality of that, is kind of important. The movie, like all good pieces of, I like all good pieces of music. There are 88 keys in the keyboard. Usually you hit a lot of notes, but the audience doesn't know that. I mean, we just go, "Wow, that's really good." But what John is very cleverly doing is making sure and he's not doing it effing deliberately. He's not doing it according to some sort of plan or a preconceived notion. He's doing it. And that's why, Greg, when you see imitators or films that try to do that stuff and, go, "Oh, well, they're trying to do it or something's not right about it," because you realize either they're not being authentic or they're not being whatever. So, I mean, it's a roundabout way of talking about the movie, that there's a certain, fearlessness about it, and the thing that you notice today, because of political correctness and people judging things from a different perspective, they go, "Well, Molly gets slut shamed, or this happens, or this happens." And, well, okay, yeah, yeah. And maybe that shouldn't be in the movies, or maybe we shouldn't extol those, or maybe that shouldn't be seen. But too bad that movie's been made. And I got to tell you something. You go into any high school today, I don't care whether it's in Fredericton, New Brunswick, or in Los Angeles, or in London, Ontario, or wherever the frig frag you want to go. Kids are teasing kids about really awful stuff.
Yep.
And it's never ending. It's like breathing, right? It's not going to end the cycle of that. So let's deal with it, as opposed to hide it or say it doesn't exist or pretend it doesn't exist. That doesn't mean, we're making it like, "Oh, like, isn't Bender great?" No, Bender's not great. Bender's troubled. Bender's in it, but the thing that we like about Bender is that he's, at the end, he goes like this, right? There's something about him that's going to prevail. Let's hope he makes it. He doesn't end up in jail. And even if he ends up in a bad circumstance, let's hope he still prevails. I mean, there's also, I think, what people kind of love but don't articulate about the movie is a sense of hopefulness at the end. That, we got through our Saturday goddamn morning. We got through this Saturday. We got through, getting through it is part of the whole experience of life, right? And not only do we get through it, we learn from it. So, I mean, we in a place that we really were died. We we were positive that we were not going to enjoy at all. We're going to be there, sitting there like this, and lo and behold, in this cafeteria, in this library on a Saturday, amongst strangers or people from different cliques or groups or whatever. My dog again.
There's one of the clicks. I was going to
But
say,
but the movie, I think, the movie works, and I think that the beauty after all this time is like, wow, you know, some films, you go back and you watch them. Even there are some movies that still favorites of mine that I cling on to. It doesn't work as well as it once did.
oh,
It's
I've
not
got a lot of those.
it's
Yeah.
not as funny as I once remember, or it's not as boy. Movies today, some of them, I love movies, period, of all periods, but sometimes movies today can be really, amazingly bad. And
Yep.
sometimes it can be like, wow, look what they're doing now. So, I
Yep.
mean, so I can't discount it. Um, you know, and
Hmm.
sometimes, a movie today goes, holy shit, it puts that film in context from 20 years ago. Well, that movie, or, when they try to remake something and it's not as good, you go, wow, that was like, I love classic films, like, from the 50s and 60s, black
Yep.
and white, and like, can't touch those, man. It's like repainting a masterpiece.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Yet they try to and often fail. But I was going to say, Paul Gleason, who played the principal, did you see uh, Not Another Teen Movie, which parodied all the it was like a scary movie, only teen movies. Paul Gleason basically reprises his role, and he goes in there. They do a little parody of the Breakfast Club where he goes. And there are these students that are in the library, and it was hilarious seeing him play that in this parody, So I don't know if you saw that, but
I never,
nonetheless,
I never saw it. I wasn't obviously not involved with it. Through the grapevine, I understood that that didn't make John Hughes very happy, but um,
oh, I didn't know that.
well, neither did I. I mean, uh, that's not like, like I have no real inside scoop on that, except that um, John was pretty protective of his work, so that doesn't surprise me. And
But
like,
yeah.
uh, when you become the king, like John became, very, very big in the field, and you can look down at your children that are in your movies and sort of wag your finger, but the realities of being a working actor are, I think, lost on a lot of kings.
Hmm.
In other words, like you, I'm a working class guy. I do my gig. I do my, I have an audition this week where I'm reading for something. If I were to show you, I've probably auditioned for 30, 40, 50 things in the last 3 years that I haven't gotten. Right. So, I mean,
Hmm.
um, it's the name of the game. It's a numbers game. So people will say, hey, you've done a lot of stuff. I go, you should see the stuff that I haven't done.
Yeah.
but,
Well, yeah.
but my larger point is that, I'm glad Paul did Not Another Teen Movie, and I'm glad he parodied it um, because friends of mine like yourself have told me like it's really major league funny.
It is, and I remember seeing that in the theater. And when he appeared, it's went after one of the kids in this, um, in the banter back and forth. Only instead of Bender, it's this other kid. People in the audience loved it. It's like they recognized him as the principal from Breakfast Club. It's like, this is cool. That
Oh,
from a
sure.
certain, yeah.
Well, I mean, the movie. I mean, any movie that parodies stuff, you make sure you got to get it to hit the right notes so that people go, "Oh yeah, that's what you're doing there."
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could tell Paul Gleason was having fun doing this, just coming back at this role and like, okay, I'm gonna parody what I did before, but pretty much do it in the same tone.
Yeah, Paul had a really good energy and was a hardworking actor. I mean, he died too young, too young.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I got my stuff here from Chiller. I gotta show this off
You
because
should show off your swag on camera.
I'm gonna show off at
Show
least
the
this swag here. Look at that.
well, that's neat. Now it disappears every now and then behind you. Oh, that's cool. That was
Yeah.
when I was young and well hung, as they say.
Yeah. Yep, I got that sign there. Boy, it was nice
Uh,
uh meeting you there, and I met quite a few people.
I wasn't too much of a jerk, right?
Oh, you weren't a jerk at all. You were the best.
My dad had a clothing store, Greg,
Mm-hmm.
small clothing store in London, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And the customer was always right. There would be days in January, February, cold winter days that he'd come home. I go, "Hey, Dad, how's business?" My mother would say, how's the store?" My dad would look up and say, "Not one person came in." So he would sit there in the store for 8 hours between 9 and 5 or 6, and not one person came in the store. There would be days like that. So that would be tough. But my dad taught me from my days in working in the store that whenever somebody's in the store, they're your customer. So as an actor, whenever anybody recognizes me, it could be in an airport waiting room, it could be, anywhere. And the minute they go, "Hey, Mister, I saw you in this movie, whatever," and I go, "Sure, you want an autograph?" I
It was
was,
a yeah.
in the minute they are like, "They're in my clothing store, man. They're my customer." Yes, no, sir. Well, you want a size 15 shirt? What do you want? I mean, I was really good selling the shirt tie combos in my dad's store, but that's another story.
Well,
But
I enjoyed meeting you there, and like I
that
said,
was,
it was my first time in the US, and Lisa invited me, and
what do you think of the United States?
I didn't like standing in immigration for 2 hours after I got off the plane, but
2 hours, eh?
yeah, you want me to tell you a funny story with that? When I get up there and the guy asked me what I was doing in the US, and I told him I was going there for a convention, and he looked it up, and he said, okay. And I told him I was there with assisting one of the talent. And I ended up telling him it was Lisa Langway. He looked her up and said, this person? Yeah. I said, she's a friend of mine. He said, you're not making any money at this? And because I told him I was a podcaster. And I said, no, no, no. She invited me. I'm just down here. And he goes, you're not making any money at this? Because he thought it was funny. I was just down there. And I said, finally, I said to him, I said, sir, you want me to tell you what I do for money? And he said, sure. And I said, 5 o'clock last night, I started cleaning one of 3 buildings. And I got done this morning in Fredericton, New Brunswick at 6 a.m. And I had to be on my plane by, I think it was 8:30.
Oh man.
I
I
had
hope,
everything packed. My
what did he
brother,
say? Go ahead, go ahead, keep on going.
yeah, I said I had no sleep, but I'm excited. I'm well awake, but I had everything packed, everything in my car. My brother took me to the airport. I get off. I get on the plane and stopped off in Toronto and then came here. I said I work as a cleaner. He looked at me and he goes, "Okay, you can go."
Well, you were honest as the day is long, and you were not, I when I'm bored, I watch this show called what is it, Smuggling or whatever, To Catch a Smuggler. It's like these guys like trying to bring in from like the Orient, like huge pieces of food, like, oh yeah, and like, or people bringing in drugs, like, inside of running shoes or suitcases.
I
Like,
get a funny story there too.
are they thinking? What are they thinking? I mean, they're
Growing
not.
up, I was a big wrestling fan. So when
Oh
I
yeah.
was at Chiller, I found like I always collected the old wrestling, rubber wrestling figures. And when I was at Chiller, I found a bunch of them, and I was like, I had a bunch of them from flea markets and stuff. But
Did
when
you
I was
buy a
at,
few?
yeah, I did. Yeah, they had them on for cheap there at Chiller. But I remember I found a Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and I knew the one existed in that form, but I'd never seen one before. So I grabbed that, and I grabbed a few. But when they went, because I had them packed in my bag, and when the bag was going through the thing, the security guy looked at me. And he goes, "Sir, do you have little people in your bag?"
Yeah,
And
I
I
do.
knew exactly what he was talking about. And I said, I told him what they were, and he opened it up. And I just remember he picked up Jimmy Snuka. Of course, anybody remembers Jimmy Superfly Snuka, the loincloth, and he would leap off that top turnbuckle and splash his opponents, looking kind of like Tarzan. And he was like looking at him, and he's saying, "This guy's not wearing very many clothes." And I said, that's the least of his problem. Before he passed away, he was up for murder.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm trying to think of the big wrestlers when I was a Whipper Billy Watson.
Yep.
When I was a kid in Southern Ontario, that name just came to my head. Whipper Billy Watson.
Oh yeah. I don't really pay much attention to it now, but I've had Roddy Piper's son and daughter both on the show, and had Larry Zabisco on here, told lots of stories about working with Bruno Sammartino, and that was amazing. And but yeah,
Well,
I
I was at the Toronto airport, and this guy came on from some TV show. I think it was Sons of Anarchy, and he was a big bruiser guy, and he looked big like a wrestler. And
mhm.
some young kid recognizes him and goes up to him and says, "Could I get your autograph?" And the guy goes, "You know, kid, I don't do that. If I give you my autograph, I gotta give her my autograph, and her." And then he points at me, and I'm like sitting there reading, and I gotta give him my autograph. I go, "No, no, you don't have to give me your autograph." But he didn't give the kid his autograph. And in the time he played this sort of big, and he might be a name actor. I don't know the show Sons of Anarchy. I think he's one of the leads. But the thing is, he could have given the kid his autograph, right?
I've heard Cameron Diaz has said that same thing. If I give one person, I give another person. I understand when people don't like to be disturbed. I think the worst one I heard was Sandra Bullock blowing up at some old guy asking for her autograph. And it turned out the guy was a veteran. I lost so much respect for her on that.
Well, the problem with these stories is they can be urban legends. So you go, well, I hear so and so is a real jerk, and like, well, my friend of a friend of a friend told me. But the problem is, I mean, going back to the people being in my own clothing store and being nice to people,
Mhm.
is that um, when you hear something kind of negative about somebody, um, odds are, and I'm not saying it all the time, odds are there might be a grain of truth in it, right? And from that grain of truth has grown the legend. Because when people are jerks, I mean, I've been around actors that have been real jerks to their
I
family.
remember our last interview, you mentioned when you were talking about Tootsie, you mentioned Bill Murray.
Well, Bill Murray is his own orbit unto himself, and I don't understand the guy, and
A lot of
don't
people don't.
I don't think I ever will. And I mean, he's talented. He's really funny. He's got his own sort of orbit. Um, it's like a jet engine, though. You sort of like, oh, I admire it. It takes me up in the air, but I don't want to be around it because it's going to make me feel horrible. you
Yeah.
know, it's too noisy. And people, there are certain celebrities or famous people or even infamous people that have a personality that can be difficult, maybe toxic, whatever. Um, I think at various points in my life, I've been, and I say this, I've been sort of had my various degrees of toxicity. I think we all do, right? Oh, you don't want to be around him. Like, I was kind of rough and tumble as a teenager, in my early
Well, you
20s.
were in, speaking of John Hughes, you were in Weird Science. I could tell you, I find I don't exactly have the best things to say about Judy Aronson, you know?
Yeah, I don't, I haven't seen Judy in years, but
Well, I'm not impressed with her for a variety of reasons, to the
that,
point where I've actually had another podcaster call her out at a con, and I didn't ask him to do it, but she really pissed me off.
oh, I'm
But
sorry.
yep, yep,
I don't know her, so I know who she is, but I hear stories about people, and I am I'm disappointed. Um, but then again, just to turn the story around, I've worked with some pretty phenomenal performers too, and I have to say, I can count the number of jerks on one hand that I've worked
yep.
with. So in that regard, in my long career, I'm fortunate. And like when I worked with somebody like now who I can talk about it without fear of recrimination, but even then, like when I worked with somebody like Tom Sizemore when I was on the Relic, man, oh man, oh man, it was obvious to me that this guy was troubled, but he did not like me. Boom. He took an instant dislike to me, and I had to be on guard. But and this guy had. I'm just sort of bringing this up.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember our last interview, I was very apologetic to you that I hated the movie. I saw it in the theater and you were like, "Oh, it's okay. I didn't like it either."
No, it's one of my, and I remember we talked about that.
Yep.
And also I have to say, just as a rule of thumb, um, and I think this is something that comes with age. Because I love something doesn't mean somebody else has to love it. When I was in my 20s and 30s, I marked my friendship on if you don't fucking love this, then you're an asshole. And that sort of gives
Well,
way
people
to,
do that with politics all the time. I'm
well,
not a fan. I'm not a fan of Justin Trudeau at all, but I'm not going to unfriend somebody who supports him. I don't do it. And I see the thing between Trump and Kamala and the stuff I'm seeing about people saying, if you vote for Trump, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah, if you vote,
it's
and I
always
don't get that.
it's always about the manner, not the matter. I mean, I disagree with a lot of people about a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, so what?
Yep.
Um, and you know, the people that I agree with on things, if I was to go down the list of things, I would probably find a lot of things I disagree with them about. You know what I mean? We
Mm-hmm.
might agree about politics or what music we like, but then I might find out that they hate brown and I love the color brown. You know,
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? Or
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not a fan of tattoos, but if you have a tattoo, I'm not going
Actually,
to.
I don't. I love I every time I hear the term tattoo, I always think of the comedian Stephen Wright saying, "I once got a tattoo over my whole body of myself, but taller."
My favorite Stephen Wright line is some people are afraid of heights. I'm afraid of widths.
Oh my goodness. I like the one where he goes, the other day I went to the hardware store, bought some used paint. It came in the shape of a house. I also bought some batteries, but they weren't included, so I had to buy them again. Another one of his I liked was where he goes, I once got kicked out of the theater for bringing my own food. My only argument was is concession stand prices are so high. Besides, I hadn't had a barbecue in a long time. I
he's
love him.
Yeah, he's one of a kind. He's unique.
He is.
But what was I talking about just before this? I forget.
You were talking about we were talking about politics and how
Like
some
we're talking
people.
about the Relic and Sizemore and people that
Yep.
you know um working with people that can be difficult. But I have to say, I mean, I've worked with phenomenal people. I mean,
You
Michelle
mentioned
Pfeiffer,
John Candy.
Michelle Pfeiffer, John Candy, Steve Martin.
Hmm. I
Um,
can name some. I mean, forget about Judy Aronson. I've interviewed three people from Weird Science I like, including yourself. But I've met and I've interviewed or not John Vernon, Vernon Wells twice, and he was at that convention that Lisa originally invited me to, and he was great. And I met Michael Berryman.
mhm.
Yep, and they were great. I've had him on
You
here.
met Alan Ruck from Ferris.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Alan's really a lovely man,
Oh, nice.
and
You
who
know,
there are
I'm
several.
going to meet
There's
Suzanne Snyder at
Anthony Michael Hall
Frightmare.
and Molly are lovely.
Yeah.
And, Judd I haven't seen in several years, but he's pretty cool. I
I'll
mean,
tell you somebody I'm connected from this.
who?
You know who I'm going to say. Oh man, I love her to death. Leanne Curtis. Man, oh man. I've had her on here, I think 4 or 5 times, and the stuff that comes out of that woman's mouth. And God bless her. I love that woman. She is so funny, but you never know what she's going to say.
How's her mom doing?
Her mom passed.
No, I know. I've just remembered that as I said it. Her mom
Well,
passed.
you know what? I
Oh,
sent her something
I
because
don't want her to see this now and realize. No,
no, no,
but
it's okay. She's
it
in
was
pretty good
recent.
spirits,
It
but
was recent, right?
yeah, I think her mom was something like in her late 90s, but
But I mean, it was this year, correct?
no, I think it was a couple of years ago.
Oh, God, John. Well, then,
But I mean, Leanne, when I found out that her mom was a classical conductor back in the day, I said, "Yeah, why don't I have you and your mom come on here together?" And I had them both come on here. And it was really cool because whenever her mom passed, I sent her the interview and I was like, here's some a nice memory for you that you have. And she is on there, the stuff she would say, like she was her mom's caregiver, but the stuff, I bet she drove her mom up the wall. And she is so funny, Leanne is. And I think she's a hilarious woman. You know, she's going to be at Chiller this fall. Unfortunately, I won't be there for that. But I remember when I went to Chiller in April, I reached out to her and I was like, if you're around, stop by. And I think she was busy at something, but she said, enjoy Persephone, But
and
she
Blanche Baker is now putting herself out there more.
I should reach out to her. Yes.
She's um she's doing a lot of teaching and stuff. She's got a big family. She's an artist as well as an actor, and she's doing very, very well. I mean, I haven't spoken to her in years, but we communicate sort of through the social media world.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
nonetheless,
yeah, that's
this
great.
is my favorite John Hughes movie, and I'm going to tell you, it really showcases early on the brilliance of John Hughes because any other movie
So,
at the
16 Candles is your favorite over Breakfast Club?
yeah, this is my favorite.
Oh, that's your favorite, not Breakfast Club.
Breakfast Club's certainly up there.
Oh, now I'm a little bit upset.
Why? You're in this too.
I thought you were interviewing me because Breakfast Club was your favorite
You
movie.
know what? When I think of you, I think of
I'm
I
teasing.
think when I think of you, I think of Breakfast Club, and that's really important because you play a cleaner in it. And I'll tell you, working
There's
as a
lovely man.
well, you know what? When the pandemic happened, I heard a lot of people talk about doctors and nurses, doctors and nurses, doctors and nurses, and I agree they're important, but I never heard cleaners mentioned. I never stopped during the pandemic, never stopped. And you know why cleaners never got mentioned? Because unlike doctors and nurses, we don't go for a PhD or any of that stuff to get our job. we're looked at as uneducated. We're looked at as, you know, we clean toilets or we sweep floors and we do all the stuff people don't like. And
You also do it under cover of darkness at night when nobody's around.
oh, I love it. Yeah.
It's almost like your fairies that come in and clean everything up when people don't notice. So people also are oblivious to you in that regard because you do your job so well. And yeah, you're definitely unsung heroes. And also you kept the hygiene up. You
Hmm.
cleaned the surfaces of bathrooms and toilets and floors and yeah, I mean,
But I haven't found any notes pertaining to Molly Ringwald or Ali Sheedy in the trash, though. So I don't have any dirt on them.
bad for you. I mean, you're looking in the wrong trash bins. Um,
But
but
nonetheless,
16 Candles was my first John Hughes movie, right?
well, you want me to tell you something that really caught me with this is that in any other movie, and this always stayed with me with this movie, any other movie at the end of it, typical Hollywood, they would have jumped out and said surprise on her birthday. You got a great father-daughter moment, and it's rare. You get a lot of uh, children with their moms. It's so rare you get to see fathers in this light. But you had the beautiful moment between Paul Dooley and Molly Ringwald, where he comes downstairs and he says to her, "Honey, I'm so sorry. We forgot your birthday." And it was like, it was such a real moment between father and daughter. And it's like, John Hughes did not go that typical Hollywood route. Yeah, they're going to jump out of the dark at the end of it.
But I mean, that's exactly what I referenced before with the Breakfast Club.
Hmm.
In a way, you could say, to continue my metaphor, that that's a jagged edge moment where, like, hey, it's not pretty. We forgot your birthday. Sorry.
Hmm.
Like we're jerks. We're adults. We forget, and what a hurtful, stupid act. But made a good movie for you.
Well,
um,
even in Breakfast Club, I love the fact that
oh, did
Bender
I
was
lose you?
giving you all this grief and you just put him in his place by saying, I see all, I know all, you know? Like, you know what's going on. And it's like, you know, that moment, like Bender's like, I better not cross this guy. You get this body language from him, you know? You think I'm trying to
Well, I
think.
mean, let's just stop for 1 second and reference the actor that you brought up there as Paul Dooley, right?
Uh-huh.
Paul, I was fortunate enough to have dinner with him just before Christmas last year, and he's like 94. He's still out there. I mean, he's got a great book for anybody who wants to read it.
Hmm.
Movie Dad. It's online on Amazon. I think people should take a look at it. If you haven't, you should take a look at it. Support him. But this I use this expression. Um, I learned it in movies, but I learned it in my dad's clothing store. I mean, you have to sell it. You have to sell the moment. You just don't sit there and do it. And Paul really sold that moment with Molly, where he goes, "I'm sorry." That really took a special because he's comic. He's there's his part is light for the most part. And the comic. Dads in American comedies are often fools, right? Portrayed as fools. So I mean, it's the role he played, but he he played that one well, and it's very interesting that you observe that moment and appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, made the
I
move.
do as well, and
Yeah.
I think you're right on the money when you say it's definitely not a Hollywood moment. If they were to make that movie today, yeah, surprise out of the cake.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed that. I love that a lot. But yeah, I love the stuff that John Hughes does, and it's like his movies are like, it's like experiences. Like it's like John Hughes saying, I went through this. I'm going to exaggerate it with some of the comedy, but this is pretty much like he was one of the writers on National Lampoon's Vacation, for example. as bizarre as the hijinks were in the movie, there is a lot of that you can buy that might have happened. Or planes, trains, and automobiles. There was something very real. There was the comedy, yes, but there was something very, very real going on there, you know? And same with 16 Candles and Breakfast Club and other films that like even something like Weird Science, where he goes into a little bit of sci-fi in there, you know. There was some very real moments in there, you know. So
Well,
um,
I mean, the movies, in my estimation, and what you're pointing out, have to have it's like, ingredients to something. If you don't have touchstones of reality, then people tune out. I mean, I've been in a lot of movies where, like, I really am buying it. I love it. I love it. I love it. All of a sudden, they lost me because something happens where you go, you know, and usually, when I was at Second City, our producer Bernie would teach us about writing, and he would term this awful fiction, where something happens in the movie just for the sake of the movie. It doesn't happen because a character would do it, you know. Uh,
you talk about Bernie Brillstein.
no, no, Bernie Solins. Bernie
Oh,
was my producer at Second City. Bernie Brillstein is a different character entirely. No,
okay.
Bernie Solins was my producer at Second City, a great theater guy.
Okay.
And you know, when writing, when somebody goes, well, my character who would never jump off a bridge jumps off a bridge now. Well, why? So, well, like in Robert Redford's case in the Butch Cassidy, he jumps into the water because he has no other choice and he's scared shitless. That's funny. But if somebody jumps off a bridge who would never jump off a bridge and there's no motivation for it, then you go, movie's lost me, you know?
Hmm.
Uh, or when they jump the shark, as the Fonz did in Happy Days, and that that expression, jump
Yep.
the shark.
Oh yeah.
People all of a sudden said, "I don't buy it anymore," right?
Hmm.
So, and it's funny, in this day and age we live in, there are still mass moments where something that was once cool or once interesting or once something becomes, instantly over. You know, food,
Wow.
trends, people.
I got to ask you, you grew up and you were born and raised in Canada. What made you go to the States? Was it for acting? And what's
I,
made you stay there?
I have I had, and I still have in my heart, an American mother. My mom,
Okay.
my mom was born in Boston and
Hmm.
married my dad, and he was a Canadian and brought her to Canada, and they had their family in Canada. And
Okay.
growing up, I was the youngest of three, and was kind of my mother's little American
Okay.
in certain ways. And I kind of looked around when I started acting, and I basically looked at the opportunity pool. And I said, well, here in Canada, there's this, and the United States, there's that. It
Hmm.
was a question of numbers and sizes, and also, what culture did I understand or want to become a part of more? And I've sort of never said this out loud, but I sort of more aspirationally wanted to be an American in terms of the movies I'd grown up with, the TV shows I'd seen. So there was something about that. And also, um, I had the opportunity. My mother was an American, and they gave me this key and said, well, you can get your US citizenship if you just go and apply. It's like, well, why wouldn't I do that?
Hmm.
So I did. And I was a precocious, aggressive kid. And then I auditioned for Second City because, I'm the best actor in the world. And I actually
Yeah.
got a job. And the day I got the job, my mother told me there's a package in the mail here from the United States consulate. Can I open it? And I go, yeah. And it was my passport.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was like, uh, what's the universe telling me here? So I mean, it sort of happened like that. And at the same time, I was working in Toronto doing the workshops with Second City. I was 21 and a half to just about to be 22, 20, just over 22, whatever. And I was getting involved, and John Candy said, "Hey, you'd be really great if you went down to Chicago, checked out Second City Chicago, because it's a bigger city, different. They're more political, and they're a little bit more social comedy, and it might be a place where and they have a touring company." And the big deal I made with my dad was, my dad said, "Do not get a job as a waiter or a bartender. Become an actor. If you're going to get a job as an actor, get paid as an actor." And I thought that was pretty cool, because we went on my parents' anniversary down in New York several years before. And every restaurant we went to, all the waiters and bartenders, everybody were all actors, out of work actors. And my father was going, "What's with these actors that are just bartenders, right?" So when that's all he knew, right? And I said, "Dad, well, I think I might want to be an actor." He goes, "Oh God, really?" He said, "Well, okay, you got 1 year to try to get a job, but you have to get a job acting." So it was attractive to me, saying, "Hey, Second City's got a touring company. They pay them to go on the road, and they pay them to act." It's like, wait a minute. It means that, because I also was the world's worst bartender. I did that job, and world's worst waiter, the world's worst. I did it once, and I got fired, and I couldn't do a straight job. It was easier for me to pretend, to serve drinks. I have to take a break for a second because my computer's going to run out. Can you
Oh,
pause?
I can pause this. Yep, no problem.
Because I got to get a power cable for my computer.
Okay, I'm just going to pause this.
One,
There we are. We're resuming here. I was going to say what people didn't hear. For anybody that's watching the Zoom video on this, I was asking John who the beautiful blonde woman was in the picture with him, and he says that's his wife. And apparently, your wife heard me. I'm like, she
very
is
happy, very
beautiful.
happy. You've made a friend. You made a friend. Flattery doesn't get you everywhere, but it certainly will you know make
Now,
make
is
her
she is
make her
she an
smile.
actress too?
She's in the hair and makeup hair world. She's a hairdresser,
Okay.
hair designer. And,
Wow.
and this is my dad. My
Look
dad,
at
Tom,
that.
1930, 31.
Wow.
Very, very smartly dressed in the suit and hat of the day. If you look at William Powell or Humphrey Bogart or James
Yep.
Cagney in these films, they were dressed identically. My father was loved to dress well, as a lot of gentlemen did in that day. And it's too bad people don't dress as well as but
Wow.
I'm not wearing a tie.
That's okay. I'm wearing a Breakfast Club shirt, so
You're forgiven. That's good. That's good.
yeah.
Like,
But
I was gonna wear my Chicago White Sox jersey, but the White Sox are doing so horribly this year that
well, do you have other color socks?
several, but they're all in the laundry right now. So
There you go. There you go. But no, I was trying to think what we're talking about uh with the films. Yeah, I'll just go back. Oh, I was going to ask you, Carl Reed, your character from Breakfast Club. Do you think he's still cleaning that school now?
I think Carl is, if he's still in the janitor game, which I'm hoping he's not, he's probably an administrator. They've some sort of custodian union guy, steward. I like to think that he saved his money in like by the age of 40 or something, and bought himself a small boat and is probably tooling around the Caribbean somewhere. Uh, that's what I'd rather think that he's doing, and he's healthy and enjoying life, and you know maybe he's an environmentalist or something. I have no.
Oh,
I don't want him to be killing too many fish at the moment.
no. Yeah, we were talking about nice people that you've worked with. Of course, you mentioned John Candy and whatnot. I was going to ask you about a few people because go back to your credits here. I got your credits up here because going
we
back.
earlier, I just want to make sure that, Brian Doyle Murray, who's Joel Murray, is also a Second City guy, really phenomenal actor and good guy.
Mhm,
And Brian Doyle, both brothers of Bill Murray, really splendid guys, And Billy from all, I saw him last time I saw Bill was at Johnny Depp's a little party he had for Hunter Thompson in Aspen for at Hunter Thompson's death farewell send off. And
mhm,
people mellow with age. They get cooler and hipper. So there's the craziness wears off. I think a lot
mhm.
of people when they kind of mellow out, which is a nice thing to see.
Yeah.
Just, just,
Well, I've
just
always liked Bill Murray,
wanted to,
but you hear the stories.
screw the stories. I mean, we were talking about earlier. There might be truth in some of them, or I said that. You know, ultimately, I think what you have to do as a fan,
Hmm.
and I've done it because I've met people, that I met people that they weren't necessarily negative or wrong. They just were not necessarily, it wasn't a good day for them. Like I worked with David McCallum, who I love from Man from Uncle, and he wasn't feeling well that day. He was lovely, but he just wasn't feeling well. So he wasn't like all this. So, not everybody can be, hey, how are you? What's going on? They can't be perfect. They can't be on all the time. But um, even if they're grumpy or unpleasant, after a while, I still watch their movies or something, and I go, I still like that. I still like that movie. I still like them up there. So you have to at some point say, I like that image. I don't have to know them or hang out with them or have coffee with them. So
Hmm.
you know what I mean?
Well, I got to ask about a few of your few people you.
After a while, you have to sort of divorce yourself from whatever personal feeling you might have. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, I
like
agree.
Dustin Hoffman wasn't the nicest guy to me, but I still like watching Dustin Hoffman movies. So
Hey, look, I mentioned Judy Aronson, but I mean, I watched Friday the 13th, the final chapter last Friday the 13th. So,
oh, let it go, and like I also think that in a lot of ways, um, we hold people up to standards that I think are too high sometimes. I'm not even just talking about actors, but people in general. And I remember once when I was in, a friend of mine once said very wise, he says, everybody, even, Jesus Christ, or everybody's going to disappoint you at some point in their lives. They're just going to disappoint you, and you have to be prepared for that. And I
you
think that
don't,
was,
you didn't disappoint me.
I will.
You won't disappoint.
Well,
Actually, the aftermath of Chiller, when people were asking about who they liked meeting and whatnot, your name came up a lot on the Facebook feed.
I didn't, but did I see any financial remuneration from that? Were you paying, loading up my PayPal amount with, next time, Greg.
Hmm. Yeah. No,
Well,
you were the second person I met when I actually, I just,
it was
I
busy
thought
then.
well, thing is, I was in immigration for so long, and then I didn't know how long the hotel was. It cost me $84 to get from the airport to the hotel because I'd never been there before. And then when I did get there,
You take a cab or Uber?
yeah, but Lisa was working with somebody there that put the Uber app on my phone so it wouldn't cost me as much. But when I got there, I did meet Sybil Shepherd first thing, and I was like, "There's a trip to the past for me." So,
Well, did
but
you know? Here's a little known fact that it was between me and Bruce Willis for Moonlighting.
I think they should have chose you.
He kicked ass in the audition, and I didn't, and I could hear them laughing through the doors because we have one sits outside while the other auditions. And he came out and he went, "Well, I guess we know who got this one." I went, "Yeah, Bruce, I guess we do."
Yeah.
You know,
No.
that's the game, brother. That's the game.
Oh
As
yeah.
Roddy Piper would say, sometimes you know get the pipe, and sometimes you don't.
Mm, yeah. But I was going to ask you about a few people like uh, Dr. Detroit, for example. I met Dan Aykroyd when he was toured through here and was getting uh, promoting his wine and whatnot, and it was cool to meet him. I got him to sign my Blues Brothers DVD, and it was cool to meet him and ask him about John Belushi and whatnot. Any stories about Dan?
Yeah. I mean, I know Danny. Um,
He's still keeping Ghostbusters alive, I'll tell you.
the night we walked back from the Blues Brothers bar at about 5 in the morning after John Belushi was raging, doing a lot of drugs that night.
Hmm.
We both saw him, and I won't go into detail except John was in bad shape.
I love John. What a
Pretty,
tremendous talent.
he was fucking brilliant.
Yep.
But he was also doing the Mexican marching powder or whatever, the cocaine. Anyway, and so he was running away. John was running away from bodyguards, and Danny just grabbed me. We were at the blues bar, like it was 4:30 in the morning, and I was hanging with them. They had their own bar across the street from Second City. We're hanging there and having a beer or something, and he grabs me and says, "Let's go. Let's just go." So we walked, and Danny, and geographically in Chicago, I lived about 5 blocks from Second City, and he lived about 5 blocks from where I lived. So he had to walk in front of my place and then walk to his place. And he lived in an area, I lived in an area called the Gold Coast, which is a very ritzy area. And I was fortunate enough to have a basement and a brownstone of a really amazing building. So I had a really great apartment. And that's sort of aside. But so
Mhm.
Dan, 4:30 in the morning, and they'd been shooting the movie, and Dan was exhausted. And we'd walk in silence for about 4 blocks. And in front of my place, like about to go in, I went, "Oh, good night." And he turns to me and he goes, "Cocaine, cocaine, man. It's going to kill him." And then he turned around and just walked down the street. So, about a year and a half, whatever it was later, 2 years
Mhm.
later, I get a call at 5 in the morning. And I had a cousin also that was a journalist, and she moved to the States here, maybe before your time. Thalia Ashuris was her name. She did the CBS Evening News here. And I get a call from Thalia. "Hey, John. Hey, what's up?" "Hey, Thalia, what's up?" "Listen, I'm calling on business." I go, "Business?" She goes, "Do you have a comment to make about the death of John Belushi?" She was working for CTV or somebody in Toronto at the time, Global. And I was half asleep. And I went, "What? The death of what?" And she goes, "Yeah, John." And this was also, I have to say, this was March 4th or 5th or 6th. This is around the same time of year when John Belushi died, but many years before. I only know this because my birthday is March 8th. So it happened around my birthday. And I go, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah, John Belushi died." I go, "I have no comment, Thalia. Sorry." Boom. And I hung up and I looked at my watch, whatever. It was 7:30, 6:30 in the morning or something. And I called over to the theater, Second City, and there was no answer. It's like early. So I ran 3.5 blocks or wherever I lived near Second City. And there were all these journalists in front of Second City. And that morning, I spent the morning keeping journalists out of Second City Theater who wanted to know about the death of John Belushi. Dan is a really sensitive, smart guy. He said that, met him many years later, he said that he's been diagnosed as an adult with an adult autism. I always thought his behavior was somewhat on the spectrum, his acting and whatever his thing is. He's a complex guy. His brother died, Peter, who I knew, and Peter was the younger. I don't want to be, younger brother who didn't have the bouquet of gifts I think that Dan really possesses. And Peter had they had a lot of money. They had really great parents, raised in Ottawa. His
Hmm.
father, an intellectual. Um, I'm probably giving you not the showbiz answer, but Dan, I think, is strangely Canadian too. There's something very Scottish and stoic about the dude.
Hmm.
He's not like me, Greek Canadian. Like on fire. He's a very, but fuck, is he talented?
Yeah.
And he's funny, man. He's funny. He did me a favor, Greg, in Chicago, where I was doing a TV show and I needed to have uh, I was working on a TV show for PBS, and he did a little favor for me that will never be forgotten. He did a cameo in it. And, you know, when people are generous with their gifts, one of their gifts is time and doing, and they're not asking for a lot of money and they're at the top of their game. And, people are saying, hey, you shouldn't do this because you should get money. It's like, that's when you really see the measure of a person. And he was brokenhearted when John died. And I
That.
don't think he's ever been the same. I think it took a piece of his heart, definitely took a piece of his career. And
Well, John was originally supposed to be the Bill Murray part in Ghostbusters. That originally that was written for John. Although they said technically they still have John in the movie because they said that the Slimer, the green Slimer ghost, they said that was based on John.
yeah, well, John Candy, the day that John Belushi died, had a really, really bad day.
I bet, yeah.
He he went apeshit, they say. I don't know the story, but I mean, he was really distraught. And I mean, when I started at Second City in 1978, the producer Joyce took me in front of the long list of names in the lobby, and she said to me, "Not one name on this list is dead." And like about 2 months later, a guy on the list, a guy named Howard Alk, AALK, from the original Second City, died. He was in his 80s. And then John Belushi died, and I thought, boy, are they fucking dying alphabetically? That was my joke to myself. But and then yeah, and people started dying. I mean, there are lots of there are not lot now there are lots of people on that list that are gone, including the woman that said that to me.
Hmm.
um,
Belushi, like you look at Animal House, Blues Brothers, 1941, Neighbors, Continent Divide.
And then Chris Farley did it, and Chris sort of wanted to do it. Chris sort of, in a strange way, did a high dive off the cocaine diving board. He just decided to do it all and like end it all in a sort of, pardon my, I mean, I've sworn a few times, but
Oh, you can swear on here. You're fine.
he pulled what I call the fuck it switch. He went, fuck
Hmm.
it, I'm just, it doesn't matter. And like when you've done that, game is over, you know? And in a lot of ways, John did that, I guess, but that's addiction, man.
I've interviewed three of the Blues Brothers bands, and I've heard the stories of John and people trying to keep him off the stuff, and how we would have stuff snuck into the scene somehow, and this and that, and I would hear all the stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a sad story that ended a long time ago. The problem is, Greg, is that, you've got, Matthew Perry, you know, anytime somebody dies to me, I mean, not that, and they say, oh, isn't that horrible? How good you said there are 10 celebrities or people right now that are in the same boat, that are minutes away from either dying, expiring, whatever, and they've got their team of professionals around them that are keeping them afloat. And like, you know, the story goes on. I mean, don't think this isn't going to happen again. I mean, and I'm not a cynic. I mean, I don't really. I mean, like, God, I really wish it would end. But but you know, a very dear friend of mine lost his son, an actor who was in Ken Campbell, who's a wonderful actor, who was in Groundhog Day. He
Okay.
says hello to Billy every time in the bathroom, and the businessman, hey, how you doing? Um, Ken lost his son the other day, 29 years old, to fentanyl. Now his son is not going to be on the front page of the paper, and neither is Ken going to be. But
It's just as much of a tragedy.
yeah. And Kenny is, their heart. His wife Kathleen, they're broken hearted, and God rest his soul. I
Mhm.
love, my friends and family. I just, um, and when I see Danny and the sadness that people live post that, and I'm sure you see it where you live, right?
Yeah, well, I lost my father back in 2022. We knew it was coming. He had ALS for 8 years, you know. But I'll tell you one thing, he saw me off to the airport that first time I went to Toronto, though. So I left my car at their place, so I wouldn't have to pay to leave at the airport. So mom and dad took me to the airport. So ever since then, my younger brother would take me. But I was happy that my father and mother saw me that first time out, and they've never flown before, so they thought I was nuts even doing this. But I was like, yeah, I've known who Lisa was since
You
the
gotta get
80s. So
people. You gotta get more people in your life on planes. That's all I have to
yeah,
say.
yeah. But I was going to ask you about somebody else I've heard great things about. You were in uh The Naked Face. Now, I've heard great things about Roger Moore.
Man, I loved him.
Yep, I've heard
I
so
loved
many great
Rover. He
things.
was funny. He was charming.
Hmm.
He was relaxed. Part of him didn't give a flying fuck, right? And that was kind of his charm.
Yep.
I mean, there was something about him that was like so relaxed. It was almost like the Perry Como. I don't even know whether SCTV when Gene Levy does Perry Como lying on the stage. He's practically, so relaxed. But um, we shot The Naked Face. Brian Forbes was the director,
Hmm.
and Brian Forbes is a British director, and Elliot Gould was in the film. Rod Steiger. I am one of my first films. I had to come in a room with a gun, and I come in the room, and the camera's covering me sort of closely, like almost like the lens here. So I come in the room, and I'm on top of my feet, and I come in like this, bouncing, and I'm bouncing in and out of the lens. And the director goes, cut, 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 John darling, John darling. And there's a line from Gilbert and Sullivan, with cat-like tread, you come in like, he goes, with cat-like tread, darling, with cat-like tread. We're not an elephant in the circus. And everybody laughs, and I'm embarrassed as hell. But so I come in next time with my gun, perfectly trained, you know. But then I run up a stairway and I turn around to look behind me right into a wall, and they keep it in the movie. So there are mistakes galore, but it was Roger was fun.
I've
Um,
I've heard the same thing about him as I've heard about Robin Williams. I've heard between the two of them, they are two of the people, they don't retreat to their trailer. They'll meet everybody right down to the person that cleans the set. I've heard that about Roger Moore, and I've heard it about Robin Williams, that they were just they everybody they met everybody. Nobody was beneath them, so to speak. And that's what I hear about those two.
I don't know what I did on the set or said on the set, and I've never ever told this story
Okay.
out loud. So you've got an exclusive here.
Hmm.
But now that pot is legal, um, though it is Ryan,
It is here too.
I must have mentioned something because we're at Second City, and Second City, people smoked pot, and I was probably in that group, um, without damning myself too much.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I finished shooting, and I was working on this movie, Naked Face, and I'd finish shooting at 6 o'clock at night, and I'd have an 8 or 8:30, 9 o'clock curtain at Second City. So I'd be working 8 hours on the movie, and then I'd have to go and do a 3 hour stage play. It was great. It was acting. I was, as my dad said, I was making money acting. And I
Mm-hmm.
was damn happy to do it. Um, and I finish my thing, and I get a knock on my trailer door. And I go, who is it? I thought it was the AD, and I open up, and it's like, it's Roger. And he goes, John, darling, can I come in and ask you a question? Yes, yes. He goes, I was wondering whether you could get me any of that Mexican tobacco that people might be familiar with. And I said, I beg your pardon? And he goes, marijuana. I said, you want me to score you some grass? Is that He goes, yes, I mean, if you can, let me know. And, so whatever. I facilitated the exchange. Let me just put it that way. Roger was happy.
The one time James
And
Bond
I've
wasn't
never
smooth.
ever said that story because Roger Moore got a joint from me, big fucking deal. But
Yeah, I'm not, no judgment from me, I think it's a cool story.
but I have
Yeah.
to say, um, he was a cool guy. I mean, not just because he might have had a spliff every now and then, but you know, um, there was something not precious about him. And you work with certain actors that every fucking move they make is like, gone with the wind. It's like, and
Well,
they
I
think,
liked it in Cannonball Run where he was making fun of himself. He was playing a character who thinks he's Roger Moore as James Bond, but he's he played by Roger Moore. And Roger Moore, like, just I just crack up seeing him in that movie where he's playing a character who thinks he's Roger Moore.
I know he's funny.
I think he's a very funny guy. You were in Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks. I'm not going to ask about Tom Hanks. I wanted to ask about Jackie Gleason because that was his last movie.
Yeah, I mean, we worked on that movie, a bunch of us Second City actors, my friends Dan Castellaneta, who's the voice of Homer Simpson, and
Hmm.
a lot of wonderful Second City actors, Jane Morris and Jeff Michalski, and my friend Mike Haggerty, and Bill Applebaum, and Richard Kind, I think, is in the movie. We all have parts in it. Um, and we were all awestruck by the fact that Jackie Gleason was there, right? He would, no, he was not very well. He was sort of towards the end of his life, and he was sort of in ill health.
Hmm.
Would kind of shuffle in very slowly, sit down in his chair. His wife would be next to him, and he had his manager with him. They would hand him some sort of tumbler. What was in it? I don't know. And he'd sit and nurse that. And he'd go, and after he shuffled in, he goes, ladies and gentlemen, let's go to work. And they'd start the shooting day, and Gary Marshall was there. And I remember my buddy Mike got his book about Gleason autographed, and how sweet it is, or whatever and he was really, he depended on a sound cue of mine. He had to enter the advertising office after I said a line, something about Ringo Starr as a grandfather, I think was my line, something. And then Jackie enters. So Gleason has to depend on a sound cue of mine. Now, bear in mind, like 6 years before, my father's telling me, get a job in the theater. And now I am working with Jackie Gleason. So it was pretty phenomenal.
I bet.
Um, And at the end of the day, they'd say, Mr. Gleason, that's a wrap. You're finished for the day. And he'd get up and he'd go, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. And he'd shuffle out. And we'd all sort of, and that was working with Jackie Gleason.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. I've
Tom
interviewed.
Tom Hanks
Huh?
was exhilarating to work with. What
Hmm.
an amazing talent. Everything he's gotten since Nothing in Common, which is incredible, is he deserves everything in my opinion. He is
Oh, he's a talent.
superstar.
Yep.
Super. But I mean, I look at other actors like Richard Gere, who I work with in Internal Affairs, uh, another phenomenal person. Billy Baldwin, Internal Affairs. Laurie Metcalf, Internal Affairs. I mean, I can go through the list of actors that I've had the pleasure of being around. I mean, I met John, worked briefly, not in any plays, but when it was at Second City in Steppenwolf, I had Bill Peterson, John Malkovich, Gary Sinise, all these guys we rubbed shoulders with. Just phenomenal people. So, I mean, all this bullshit about actors being, hard to work with and all this are temperamental stuff. I mean, 99.9% of them are salt of the earth. Bill Paxton, the late great, what a great guy he was. And
Yeah, he went way too young, Bill
that was a,
Paxton.
that was a major league tragedy for his family as well as for, the movie people.
Yeah, absolutely. What about Judge Reinhold? Yeah, I loved him ever since Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But you
Judge
worked with him.
Judges was very good to me, very funny. We did a movie um, called Offbeat, written
Hmm.
by Michael Dinner, with Joe Mantegna's in it, and a lot of really amazing people. Fred Gwynn, who is Herman Munster. I had the pleasure of riding in a limousine with him one day. That was an experience.
Hmm.
I mean, for a kid that, in 1978, his father said to him, well, get a job acting. And then within the next 10 years, the people that I got to meet and work with, and since then, it was, quite a splash of experience.
Hmm. Now, I've interviewed a few people from Roxanne, like Steve Middleman. He was on here. So was Chandra Berry, very classy woman.
Chandra,
I
yeah,
had her, huh?
yeah, she's great.
Oh yeah, I love her glasses. Like she was just classy when she was on the Zoom here. And of course, Steve Middleman had the hat on that he wore in the film. He had that. And of course, you're in this. And you know, I'm reminded because we just recently lost Shelley Duvall and we lost Fred Willard not too long ago. Any stories about them?
Well, I mean, Shelley Duvall was really lovely to work with.
Mm.
And boy, oh boy, when we were in Nelson, BC, we had some lovely dinners and some nice times together. I was very sad to see, you know, that mental illness tagged her in such a severe way, and that, she met her end the way she did. We lost Max Alexander, Matt Latanzi, who was in the movie, lost Olivia Newton-John, his wife.
I was, oh boy, I was in talks of getting Olivia Newton-John on here.
Yeah,
I was going back and forth with her management, but due to her health,
yeah.
it was delaying it. But he never said no. He said, we're definitely going to keep you in mind. And on the year that she had passed, um, it looked promising that I was going to have her on. But when her little brief little tour that she was going to do got canceled, next thing that she happened, she passed, and I would have loved to have talked to Olivia. I might do a tribute, see if I can get her daughter to come on and talk about her because I've heard so many great things about Olivia from people I've interviewed from Greece, and I grew up listening to Olivia Newton-John.
Well, she was I think on the set once. I really didn't get a chance to interact with her.
Yeah.
Jackson Brown was on the set of Roxanne because he was dating um, Daryl Hannah at the time.
Hmm.
Um, that was an exhilarating experience. I loved working on Roxanne. And Steve Martin, I mean, what he and Marty are doing now in Only Murders in the Building is really wonderful. And It's
And
always
he's a
great to
banjo
see.
player.
Yeah, phenomenal banjo player.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
listen, I have to head off into the blue of Hollywood today. I've got an audition.
Oh,
So
I thought this was an audition.
did I pass?
I think you passed with flying
Are we
colors, you
gonna
know.
do part 3 someday soon, or what?
Sometime we'll have to do that. I mean, you were in like Legally Blonde.
Have I not been on long enough for you today, or what? I mean, you've got a
You
lot
know
of
what? My longest guest
was like 5 hours.
yes. And
Oh
he
no,
warned me about that before I had him on.
who was it?
He was what was his name? He wrote the book on Blade Runner, and he was on set for Conan the Barbarian. What is his
And you
name?
can't remember who he is, and you had him on for 5 hours. Shame on
It's
you.
on the tip of my tongue too.
Well, I'm not going to be on for 5 effing hours, and you won't remember my name then.
You know what? But I mean, he warned me, but he told some stories, you know. Um, oh gee, it's right because I got the Blade Runner book, Future Noir. I'm gonna feel so stupid it's gonna come to me in the moment we skip off. But no, I was gonna ask you about The Late Shift, which was brilliant, and Legally Blonde, but you know what? We could save that for another time. But
Let's not use all the chestnuts up. If you want, we can reconvene in 4 or 5 months. See how this one does. If anybody watches this, I want to know who watches this. I want to
oh,
know
your first interview is done really well.
who you are. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, because I've shared a few things in here that are a little bit edgy.
Are you kidding me? I had Leanne Curtis on here.
I know.
I mean, what you shared with me is tame compared to the stuff that she
Well,
talks about.
this is as edgy as I'm going to get today.
You need to have dinner with her, and then you'll be like, oh, okay.
All I have to say to you is that clock is 20 minutes fast.
Is it? Well, you know what? It was an honor meeting you at Chiller, and you know, I was honored to have you come back on here today. I was just wondering before we close off if you do a plug for my show.
Sure, what do you want me to do?
Just state your name and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Hey, it's about time you tuned in. You're watching Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise, and do not step away.
Yes, folks, because if Vendor couldn't, if he knew what Vendor was up to and the rest of the Breakfast Club, he knows what you're up to too.
I go through your notes, I read your notes, I go through your lockers. I am the eyes and ears of this podcast.
Absolutely. But I bet you your wife is the eyes and ears on you. I bet she's got you under control.
Right now, she just said, "Are we gonna have breakfast or late breakfast?" I got to run.
God bless you. Thank you so much for the
Back
honor.
at you double time. Be well.
You
See you
take
again.
care. Absolutely.
Ciao, ciao.
Take care. Bye-bye.